webinar here today is to ask the question, how does the EPA Safe Drinking Water Act lead and copper rule affect me? And that kind of goes back to what perspective you are as far as, are you a public water system or are you a homeowner who's tuning into this? So some of what we're talking about here that relates to the cities. These are requirements under the new rules that are coming up. As far as the information we're passing on to homeowners, this is guidance for you to use as you see fit. Looking at what your individual needs in your homes are as we move forward. So with that, talk a little bit about what the Safe Drinking Water Act is. It was enacted in 1974, and it's designed to protect your water supply from its source, whether that is surface water like a river and an intake, or it's groundwater and you've got wells out there, all the way through the treatment at the plant, then through the distribution and to your tap. So the Safe Drinking Water Act covers the whole aspect of that route to get the water to you. This presentation focuses on the pipes used to convey that finished water from the treatment plant to your homes and your taps in your house. Next slide then, Sandy. Sandy is actually going to be moving forward with the presentation here so that we didn't have to go back and forth, switching presentations. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of today's roadmap. It's always good to know where we're going with the presentation. So we'll talk a little bit about the new lead and copper rules. There's specifically two. There's the lead copper rule revision called the LCRR, which was finalized in 2021. And then there's the lead copper rule improvement, LCRI, which was promulgated in 2024. So what happened was in 2021, we had a finalized rule. Then we had a change in leadership in Washington, D.C. We had the lead copper rule revision pulled back. We had it looked at, and I guess they thought they improved upon it. So now we've got what we call the lead copper rule improvements. So there's two rules here, and they kind of tie together, and that's where we're going to kind of spend our time at here this afternoon. So with the LCRI in 2024, it did keep three components from the rule from 2021. Couple of things that it kept in there was what we call an initial lead line inventory. This is needed to be submitted to the department by 10/16/2024 by all public water systems, and then updated yearly up through 2027 when that baseline inventory, or when that initial lead inventory will then become what the cities will be using for their baseline inventories moving forward with the rule. So right now, systems have about 3 years to finish up trying to find lead lines in their cities, and that's the basis of what we're going to be talking about here today. The other points that brought forward from the original 2021 rule into this one was a 24-hour public notice that water systems need to provide to all of their customers if there's ever a lead action level exceedance. In the past, it was a notice that had to go out, but it was not a 24-hour notice to all consumers as it is now. And then there's specific information regarding lead that had to be included into the 2024 and future consumer confidence reports. These will be coming out, or should be out, by July of 2025 here. The CCR, or the Consumer Confidence Report, is an annual water quality report to inform customers of the current status of their water system. And we've been doing these since the early 2000s. These have been going out yearly from water systems to consumers. So that is nothing new. What is new in it is some of the information on lead that will be coming up in July to you. Some of the objectives of these two rules here were to reduce risk to public health And the second one is to increase both the public and educational awareness about lead itself. So sometimes to know where you're going to, it's helpful to know where you've been. So we'll talk a little bit about North Dakota's current compliance with the lead copper rule as it is right now. We'll talk about the original lead copper rule and its standard monitoring framework so that you understand the sampling moving forward with this a little bit. And then we'll talk about some rule revisions that happened in 2024 and 2010. I plan on making these very fast bullet points here so that we're not dragging out a lot of, I guess, old requirements and things like that. But sometimes you need to know where we're at to understand what happened in the past there too. Next slide, Sandy. So in 1988, North Dakota implemented a statewide prohibition on the use of lead. We did this through the North Dakota State Plumbing Laws. You can see there North Dakota Century Code 43-18 and also the North Dakota State Plumbing Code, the materials, and then also joints and connectors. So at that time, basically what was said is that to convey water into homes, you could no longer use lead lines, connectors, or any type of material that had lead in it. Now, I will preference all of this by saying, even though there is a prohibition on the use of lead, if you go down to Menards or something and you buy faucets, some of the brass containing fixtures will have 2 to 3% of lead in those fixtures. So it's not lead free. It is reduced lead. I guess that is the best way to put it. So just kind of beware of that. Cities and residents who have built after that time frame, you don't have to worry about lead. The materials leading into the homes will not have lead in it. There may be some taps that have a small amount of lead in it, and that is the reason for sampling the way we do and how we do it in a kitchen or a bathroom, places like that where these fixtures are found. So in 1991, the lead copper rule came into effect, and it follows what we call EPA's standard monitoring framework. Okay. And that is based on a city has to take a number of samples based on their population. So the more people you have, the more samples you take, basically, because you got more pipes in the ground, and it's just a wider distribution system. So when we started doing the lead copper rule, there was an initial 2 rounds of monitoring of sampling that had to be collected 6 months apart in homes that contained lead and copper lines. So at that time, based on the number of samples that you took, if you were required to do 20 samples, you had to take 10 from lead lines and 10 from copper lines was how that was set up. And after these 2 rounds, those initial first 2 rounds of 6-month monitoring, if the data showed that lead was less than 0.15 parts per billion or copper was less than 1.3 parts per million, then the system was placed on yearly monitoring for 3 consecutive years after that. After those 3 years, if the monitoring still indicated that the water system was less than 0.15 parts per billion for lead or 0.13 parts per million for copper, then the system was placed on 3-year reduced monitoring, which is the same framework we're still using now. So systems on 3-year monitoring, if we detect that there's something going on, we'll then put them back on the 6-month monitoring and make them work their way back off again. And that's the standard monitoring framework for not only lead under the Safe Drinking Water Act, but some of the other chemical rules that we have as well. In 2003, there were some minor revisions to these rules. There were clarifications to monitoring requirements, some notification updates, and at that time, lead line replacement was brought into the rule. This wasn't mandatory, but it did talk about systems replacing lead lines at that time. And then in 2010, we had what we called the short-term revisions, and then there was what we call an MCL goal, which said that lead should be 0. Now, this is not an enforceable level. It just means that best practice for water systems is to try and get to zero when you're out there monitoring for lead in your distribution system. And again, as we talked about in 2021, we had the final revision of the lead copper rule revisions there. That was pulled back and then replaced with the 2024 rule improvements. And again, that kept certain parts, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. So that right there is the history of the lead copper rule in North Dakota and the lead bans and everything else that you need to know to bring us up to this point. Next slide, Sandy, please. So where are we at the moment? Well, for the latest 3-year monitoring period, which would have started in 2022 and ended in 2024, all public water systems completed their monitoring as required in North Dakota. So some of the data that we saw here was 312 water systems collected samples. Of those 312, we had 302 water systems remain on the 3-year reduced monitoring schedule because their results were below the lead action level of 15 parts per billion. 10 water systems showed results greater than that 15 parts per billion, and they were returned to more frequent 6-month monitoring to further characterize their system's water quality. 7 of those 10 public water systems are now on annual monitoring since they have completed that two rounds of 6-month monitoring, and it indicated that the lead issues were due to more or less premise plumbing issues. Now, some of those can be issues with, again, what's going on at the tap there. Also, there's a piece of this when we do sampling. It's one of the only rules that has homeowners do the sampling for the systems and get the samples back to the system. And there's a stagnation piece of this where you have to let the water sit in the lines for a minimum of 6 hours, but not more than 18. So a lot of times we can see homeowners who go take samples that are not at a sink in a kitchen or a bathroom where they should be. They might decide to go down and take it out of a wash sink in the basement that hasn't been used for 2 or 3 months. And so we see elevated lead levels in some of those places. So when we do see these higher elevated lead levels in systems, we do follow up with them to find out where the sample was taken and what the issue may have been to have that increased sample at a tap, and then we still will put them back on the 6-month monitoring and make them work their way off. But anyway, so right now that's kind of where we're at with systems, looking right now at quarterly and annual monitoring. We currently have 3 water systems that are on the 6-month monitoring that have finished with 1 round of monitoring completed, and we're waiting for that other 6-month monitoring to come back to put them back on again, that yearly monitoring then to try and get back to the 3-year monitoring period as they are able to do if they can show that they are below the 15 parts per billion regularly and frequently. Next slide, Sandy, please. So what are the new lead and copper rule objectives? Well, again, as I said, the first one is to reduce the risk of exposure to lead through drinking water. There's 3 ways of doing this. First of all is to locate lead service lines through a materials survey. So this is a requirement of the water systems themselves. All waters, I think we had all but 2 water systems complete this and turn this into us as of October. So again, the thought behind this is to try and come up with the types of materials that are going into homes so that we know if it's lead or galvanized or what type of actual pipe is coming into a home. Another part of it is by replacing all lead service lines that we find in these material surveys within 10 years after this survey is completed. That's done through some federal funding and some grants that are out there to get these lead lines out of the distribution system and just make that water safer, I guess would be the word to consume. And the other part is these rules will lower that lead action level from 15 parts per billion down to 10. So it will make sampling and going, that quarterly, the 6-month monitoring and yearly monitoring will be triggered then at that 10 parts per billion instead of the current 15 parts. The second part of this, again, is increasing public education regarding lead and its health effects. And again, as we said, that 2024 Consumer Confidence Report is the first step in this. There's also some public education materials that the system will need to send out to the homeowners as we get farther into this rule. But for right now, the 2024 Consumer Confidence Report is where that information will come from. Next slide, Sandy, please. So the CCR is, again, as I stated earlier, an annual water quality report written by the system to inform customers of the current status of their water system. So the lead copper rule revision requires that specific information requiring lead be included in the 2024 and all future CCRs being sent out to consumers. Information required will have the health effects of lead. It will have a lead educational statement indicating ways in which customers may reduce the amount of lead exposure from drinking water by flushing their taps with cold water for cooking and drinking, and other ways of reducing lead, filters, things like that. Also, there will be a range of sample results from the most current round of sampling. In the past, it's just had a percentage of the monitoring that was in there, but now you will see a range from the highest to the lowest samples throughout the distribution system as they sample every year and what those look like. And then the lead inventory information, such as why is this being done? Where is the report located so that consumers may view it? Future actions that may be required to update the inventory, and any information regarding potential funding for systems and homeowners for replacement class 4 lead lines. Next slide, please, Sandy. So what is lead and why is it an issue? Well, again, lead is a naturally occurring mineral that is used in manufacturing and metals. Lead in drinking water is a serious health issue. Now, outside of a building, lead is not found in the source water. It is strictly found in pipes, that connect the homes to the water mains. These are known as service lines. These lead service lines are typically the most significant source of lead in a water system. In the interior of our buildings, lead can enter the drinking water through plumbing materials that corrode, such as faucets or fixtures. As I stated, some of the fixtures can have a small amount of lead in the material used to make them up. And then lead pipes are more likely to be found in older cities and homes, as we kind of stated with the lead ban that was stuck in place there in the late 80s. Why is it important? Again, children, even low levels of lead can be in blood of children, and that can result in behavior and learning problems, lower IQs and hyperactivity, slow growth, hearing problems, anemia. Pregnant women can have reduced growth of the fetus, premature birth. All adults can have cardiovascular effects such as increased blood pressure and hypertension, decreased kidney function, and other issues. I will, I guess, make the statement that if you have concerns about exposure to yourself or children, please talk to a local doctor for additional information about blood lead testing that can be performed as well. At this point, I will turn it over to Sandy, who will talk a little bit more about what the requirements are for the inventories and where we're going in the future. Sandy?
I hope everybody can hear me. Hi, I'm Sandy Warshik. I'm the Lead and Copper Rule Manager for the state of North Dakota. And we're going to talk now about what's going on. What is a service line? What is these inventories under the Lead and Copper Rule improvement is part of, and what you can do or decide to do, and what's happening at the public water system line. So let's first start talk about what is a service line. Most people understand what the water main is. The water main comes down a street or an alley, and it's the conveyance of water from the plant throughout the city. But from the water main into your house is what we call the service line. It's what we call, if you take a look at the picture, from the corporate stop, that's where your service line hooks up, all the way into your house to like your water main, our water meter. That is what we define as a service line. That is what is going to be part of this inventory as we talked about under the lead and copper rule improvement. That is going to be part of it. We're going to inventory on that spreadsheet the public water systems from where it connects to the main and goes to the water meter inside your house. And they're looking at the material that service line is made up of. There is the service line. Most people don't realize that's where their service line or water meter might be coming into their house. Everybody's water meter comes in, or a service line comes into their house at different locations, depending on what they have. If you have a full basement, you could go downstairs and look, see if you can find your water meter. If you have a crawl space, it'll come in underneath into your crawl space. Or if you have a trailer house, it comes underneath your trailer house, hooks up to it, and it's enclosed in that crawl space area. If you have a slab on grade home, it will come through the floor and usually in some place where you can find your water meter and your shutoff valve for your water in your house. The other thing we talk about is ownership of the service line. Every public water system and city has their own rule or regulations defining what is the ownership of the service line. Most systems have that in their policy, and just generally it's split what we call between public owned side and the private owned side. The public side sometimes is from the corporate stop to the curb stop. And if you ever want to know what a curb stop, go out to the front of your house and look around, and you might see this little round item sticking out in the grass, could be buried and stuff, or in the sidewalk. And that's where you're able to shut your water off on the outside. The city will do that, so their public water system. And then from that curb stop where it comes into your house or to your house, that is usually owned by the private individual. But again, every public water system has its own ownership on service line. Sometimes the homeowner owns the whole line. Sometimes the public water system owns the whole line. Sometimes it's split. Talk to your public water system on it. The other thing I'm going to define a little bit is a term that's used in premise plumbing. Premise plumbing is where you own the plumbing inside your house. It's not the ownership of the private water system where the service line comes in. It is your plumbing inside your house. So just remember that. One other thing about service lines and why we're identifying this, because we're looking for these lead lines coming in. Most lead service lines will not be greater than 2-inch diameter coming into the home. So your water main will not be a lead line. It might be cast iron, but it's not lead. And so that is due to the size and weight of when you started laying these lead lines. So just remember, a service line is where your service line is collect the water main to your building. So under the lead and copper rule, there were some mandates that were sent out under this regulation. And one of the mandates is that all public water systems nationwide were required to conduct initial lead service line inventory of all service lines within their system and send that information to DEQ by October 16th, 2024. Part of this mandate of this inventory required the system to identify and classify the service lines by either being defined as lead, a galvanized requiring replacement, and this is what we call GER, to be fun about it, and that's where a galvanized line was either hooked up to a lead line or priorly hooked up to a lead line. The service line is non-lead, it's like copper, polyplastic, or it's unknown. And usually that definition of unknown is that they don't have a documentation or something identifying what that line is. The other thing I had to turn around, and these service lines have to be identified by material type, no matter the ownership of the service line, whether it's split or owned all the way through, and all service lines had to be on the inventory, whether they're in use currently, turned on by a water system or goes to an empty lot, or it's part of a pasture taps, because some rural water systems do run service lines out to a pasture tap or irrigation, or if it's a fire line to, in some big commercial systems, they'll have separate water lines set in for fire lines. They all have to be on this inventory. These inventories must be identified and updated annually. So the reason they're updated annually is as the inventory, more information is found, these updates and these unknowns can be downsized. The second part of the lead and copper rule service line inventory also required the public water systems to notify homeowners what their service line is identified or classified as if it's classified as lead, galvanized, requiring replacement, or unknown. So back October 2024, November, a lot of homeowners and building property owners received a letter from their public water systems, and the letter says your service line is identified as lead, GER as we call it, or unknown. If it was identified as non-lead, you did not receive a letter because that letter was not needed to be sent. These letters will be continually be sent out annually to the property owners until all materials identified as non-lead. One of the things I want to stress is if you received an unknown letter, it does not mean it's non-lead. We just don't have written documentation or visual inspection telling us what that material of that service line is made up of. So going back to our 2024 results, our service line numbers in the state of North Dakota, what came in. We had some systems that were combined up, and so we had only 310 systems needed to do lead service line inventories. 308 sent them in. As of the December 31st, 2024, we had 274,818 service lines inventory. Of that, we know of 5,112 of them were lead, 429 were galvanized, 146,001 non-lead, but our big number is running a norm with the nation. We had 123,276 identified as unknown. We either had both sides or one or the other side of that service line ownership not being able to identify as some type of material. So what's going on in the future, our next steps by the public water systems is start downsizing these number of unknown service lines on their public water system inventory statewide. That is our big push these next couple of years. And how are we going to do that? So first thing most homeowners need to know is, how do you identify your service line material? What do you do? And how would you could go about and go down and look at your service line and know what you're looking at? Well, the state of New York was really nice to present us with a little mini video that we'll play here, and it shows how homeowners can identify their service line material type. So I will start that here.
Do you know if there's sound on this video, Annie or Sandy, or is it?
Pardon me. I guess we're having sound problem here and everything.
I'll just put a link to the video in the chat.
We'll do that. We'll put the link in the video in the chat and stuff. Pretty much what it does is shows you the step-by-step process of going through and looking at your how to do it. We also on our website going forward and stuff have a slide on how you can do the exact same information and identify. Taking a screwdriver, a flat edge, or a key, if you don't have that, you go down, find your water meter. You look at the pipe where it comes out of the either the floor or the wall, and you look at the metal and you can scratch it very lightly. Don't gouge it, just scratch it lightly. And if the scratch comes out looking like copper, like a brand new penny, and you have a magnet and the magnet does not stick to copper because magnets won't adhere to copper, you got a copper line. If you got a silvery gray line and you scratch it and it's really shiny, but your magnet will not stick, you got a lead line. Lead will not, magnets do not stick to lead. If you have a silver line and you scratch it and it has a dully silver look, but the magnet will stick, you have a galvanized. Magnets will stick to galvanized, it will not stick to a lead line. Then, looking at that information, we always tell people if you have a nice cell phone, take a picture of it and stuff, because then you can record what kind of material you have on your system. Again, this is a way homeowners can do self-testing. A lot of public water systems this last year sent out information asking people to survey and to go do this information, send a picture, do the scratch test, send it through on their surveys, and send it into the public water systems. They also had their own handouts that you could follow too and how to send it in. Again, this first round of survey happened back in before October 16, 24, and is just part of this initial round of inventory. This is a way that public water systems were able to talk to the homeowners, to have the homeowners send their information. And then once they received this information, this is how we could add the information to the inventory, and then the public water systems know which type of template letter and classification your service line was going to be defined as: unknown, non-lead, lead, or GER. With that, the public water systems then sent out notification letters to homeowners defining and characterizing their service line. This material type service line again was lead, GER, unknown. If it was all non-lead and defined as that, you did not receive a letter. Part of this notification also provided information the public water systems wanted you to know as a homeowner. They wanted to turn around and have you add in steps you could do, take if it was a lead line or GER line, such as if you're gone as a snowbird for 3 months, when you turn your water system, how to flush your water system through and run your water, how to clean your aerators out, how to turn around and if you have a lead line, a replacement and funding opportunities the system was going to offer you, what steps to report or update your service line material if you had information, where to send that information in. And the biggest thing is how to contact your public water system if you had questions on anything on this inventory or this notification. Again, the question was asked, why did I not receive a letter on my service line material? It was classified as non-lead. They did not send a letter. The other question that we received was, how long will I receive this notification or letter? You will receive this notification annually until both lines of the service line is identified as non-lead, or if service line that has been identified as lead agur has been replaced with a non-lead line. So the other big question we had that was provided to us was questions on what was going on when I received an unknown letter. What does unknown mean? And what unknown means when you receive that notification if your service line was identified as unknown is one, either the public or private side did not have written documentation that the city could find, or they could not have a visual inspection of this outside of the service line, either on the city side owned or the private side, the homeowner's side. So that is why it was defined as unknown. So let's do a little quick scenario on his. If there's a yes on the chart, they knew what the material type was. It was identified by a written document or a visual inspection. If on the chart it says no, no meant unknown, they don't have anything. So if the public side, they knew what it was, say it was copper, but the private side was unknown, the property owner received the letter. Swap the other two. Public side, they didn't have the documentation on what was there, but the private side, the homeowner sent that survey in, told them this is what we had. Why did I receive an unknown letter? Because the public side still didn't have that identification. If both sides were identified as non-lead, you did not receive a letter. If both sides were identified as unknown, property owners received the letter. Again, this was required under the lead and copper rule that they had to receive notification of what that service line was classified for. So moving forward, what are we looking at in the future so we don't have to send all these unknowns and we can identify these service lines? What's happening? So currently what's happening in the future over the next couple of years, public water systems and rural water systems are going to be are in other systems, and some contractors the public water systems are working with are going to start sending out additional surveys. They're going to be doing some media campaigns going out where the firms are going to be announcing their plans through social media, Facebook, sending letters, sending people out, going knocking door to door, asking the homeowners to fill out or let them in to take a look at it. And at that time, when that happens, it's the homeowner's choice now to decide what they're going to do. How are they going to help the public water system identify that private side or that unknown side of the service line? The homeowner can make the decision of, I'll fill out the survey that was mailed to me, take a picture, send it in. That way I know what's going on, send it in, and I don't have to have somebody knocking on my door and letting somebody in my house. If the public water system sends somebody out and they're knocking on the door, it's up to you as a homeowner to decide if I'm going to let them in or not. If you're concerned about that, call the public water system, say, is this person supposed to be here? Who are they working with? Are they what we call legit, and it's yes or no? Or you can call the public water system and say, hey, I know these people are going to be out. Can I set up a time for them to come visit me? You also have a right to refuse to let them in and provide the information too. This is all your decision. But again, we're asking your help on the private side to help fill this side out, because you can go down, do a visual inspection, send a picture, provide that information, and then we have that information as needed. Again, as the private side is being identified and looked at, the public water system is also going to be working on their side of the system and identifying their side of the service line as they go do their daily work throughout the season. So if they're doing main replacement, they're doing a fix somewhere and they're digging in the ground, if they find a service line, they're going to be working on identifying their side of it. Again, this inventory work is going to occur where the public water systems also will be having to maintain their compliance water sampling of homes as they're currently scheduled. So even though you get asked, you might be on a sample site plan to do lead copper sampling for your home, that's still going to be ongoing as they're scheduled. So again, if you go along, you're asked to help out, fill out, send the information or survey back in, we request your help. If you have questions on what's going on and when this is going to happen, contact your local public water system or sometimes your city auditor. They will have that information, or watch your local social media. The engineering firms and the public water systems they work with will be in touch with people, letting you know when it's happening in your system. So if you also want additional information on lead and copper and what's happening for lead in drinking water, EPA has a number of great sites to look at. You can go to the US EPA Consumer Lead website. It gives some great information on how to reduce lead in drinking water if you have it, how to replace lead service line information generally, and other sources of lead. We also have it on the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality website. We have general information on not only drinking water, but also on lead-based paint and other lead sources. Both are good sources. Again, if you have questions on what's happening in your area, contact your public water system first, because they will have what's specific to your location. We work with the whole state of North Dakota, 310 public water systems. A lot of these public water systems are rural water systems with multiple little towns in it. Everybody will be doing something different at a different time. So watch social media, look at your water bill. They will be sending information out as they go around. If you want to contact me, you can contact me. I'm Sandy, and this is my email and my phone address. But like again, just generally start local and work your way up to me. With that, that's the end of my talk. If you guys have any questions, we'd be more than happy to take them now. Is there anything in the chat, Jen?
I do not see anything in the chat. So you all feel free to take yourselves off mute and ask Aunt Sandy a question if you have any, or go ahead and type a question in the chat. She's happy to answer. You can also email her if you don't feel comfortable, like
Yeah.
doing it in a public format. And I'll put Sandy's email address here in the chat. And then I'll also put her direct phone number. Her direct phone number is 701-328-5190.
It's a lot of information right now, but it's something that's really going to be needed in the future. And the biggest information I always have to homeowners and to, if you have any city council members or members online that deals with it, is let your locals know what's going on. By educating and letting them know what's happening and giving them a lot of information up front, it will increase the amount of ability that homeowners will actually help out on this whole inventory, because it's going to take everybody to get these inventories in, filled out, completed. Because once everything on these inventories are filled in and we can say, okay, we have systems with no lead service lines or GER lines, and they're all identified as what we call non-lead service lines, it will really help the water systems long term. A lot of work decreases as that happens. So.
Thank you all for joining. Oh, Hope has a question. Go ahead,
Yes,
Hope.
Thanks so much for putting on this call. I really enjoyed learning all about this new rule being put into place and some of the actions that have been being taken. I did miss the first part of the webinar, so it's possible that you answered my question, but are we to the point where lines are being replaced if they're being identified as lead or the material that we're seeking to replace?
Some systems are starting with that right now. There's some public water systems and cities have lead service line replacement programs in place. Other cities are currently working on that to secure funding. Some cities are actually not doing it. They're absorbing some of that funding and doing it themselves and have been doing it long term. So every public water system is at a different spot, but there is funding out there available for cities and public water systems to apply for lead service line replacements.
Great, and thank you so much for the information. I know my role is more focused on local mitigation plans, and wastewater systems are often addressed in that, so it's great to know that there are funding sources out there to complete these projects.
Thanks for the question. And I don't know if, I can't remember if Greg had an opportunity to say this yet or not, but it doesn't hurt repeating if he did. But North Dakota is very far ahead of the game with our inventory system. We are much further on our percentage of public water systems that have turned in their inventories than other states by miles. And when you even think about the few water systems that had to have some action, that had to do some changes, that is a minor percentage. It's like less than 1% of all of our public water systems. We have excellent public water systems in North Dakota, excellent community water systems, excellent rural water systems.
Mhm.
Everyone works to keep themselves in compliance, and we're really fortunate. So,
And I am going to give a second shout out. I have to give a shout out to all the cities' public water systems. Some of these engineering contractors that worked up with the public water systems to help them out, because the first round was a huge lift of reviewing all their historical records. And you have records, when City of Fargo first started, our City of Minot first started, some of these all these old records, going through, reviewing, looking at it, and identifying what's there, what's going on now, and then finding that information and putting it into a spreadsheet and now we're starting that second round of, okay, this is what we have now, where we're missing, where do we need to improve and identify these unknowns and get these, and also at the same time, where we do have these lead lines, trying to start working on removing them too. So they did a huge lift, and it's going to be a big lift going on the way through for the next couple of years till we get everything identified down, and all these unknowns are identified down as either non-lead or lead or GER. So I can't say how well some of these systems have done, and it's a huge job for them.
well, thanks all. If
Yep.
you don't have any more questions, we're going to, like I said, put this recording out on our website, the same link for the DEQ page I put in the chat, and you can go revisit that later. And if you don't have questions now, maybe you want to watch it at a later date and might come up with some different ones. But we're here to answer your questions, and thank you for participating today. And thank you to Sandy and Greg for their talk today and keeping us all up informed on this really kind of complicated rule, and boiling it down to where people like me can understand it. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you all.